Hello students, it's Dr. Yu. Today, we want to start with an introduction to the job market. Specifically, we're going to talk about jobs and mindsets. As you take professional communication, you need to understand the paradigm of the job search because it's changed. It's changed a lot since the old days of just having a written resume and then going to the company and dropping it off and talking to the manager and all of that. Everything's electronic now. Everything is far more competitive, especially in our economy today, post-pandemic and such, and with recessions and just globalization. The job market's way more competitive now. And you have to know how to search for a job in an effective way to really excel at finding the right job that fits your skill set, that compensates you well, and makes you happy. So let's get to it. What we're going to do in this lecture or this segment is we're going to talk about three things. Now, they're going to seem very basic, but we're going to go into depth with each of these three things because you have to understand them at a technical level, especially when it comes to resume writing, which when you write a resume, you're going to be doing some things that you'll want to know at a deep level, and also when you're selling yourself on the job market as well. First off, we're going to look at what is a job. Now, I understand, I have a job. What's going on? My job, get hired, get paid. Okay, yes, we're going to understand what a job is, though, at a deeper level, because even the notion of what a job is has changed in the past, I would say, 20, 30 years. So we're going to explore that a little bit more in depth. And then what is a market? And this is where the paradigm's really going to come in together with the job search, because I think what some people still are struggling with is what is my mindset when I'm on a market as opposed to when I'm not on a market. So we'll talk about that. And then lastly, what is the winning mindset for this market? Now, I know this sounds kind of self-help-ish, like it's going to be a Tony Robbins seminar or something, but more or less what I want to do is provide, when you understand what a job is and then what a market is, you'll then know what's the specific general or what's the overall strategy that we all need to take when we're on the job market then. So it's kind of adding these two things together and then saying, here is our persuasive strategy. So we're going to be thinking of this as a persuasive strategy that we're going to have as we approach the job market. And in my professional communication class, pretty much the whole semester is going to be hitting on this mindset. So let's start with what is a job. Now, a job, to understand that, we have to first make a distinction between a position versus a job versus a career. So a position is basically, from the company's perspective, a role that is expected to produce some kind of output for the company. So a position in a company is basically, this is a specific output that we expect at this area or department of our overall company map. A position is expected to achieve certain results. That's different from a job. A job is a particular set of tasks that you are held responsible for fulfilling at a company. The task set that you're given in a job could fill a position, or maybe you'll have 2 or 3 different jobs. So you might have 2 or 3 people fulfilling the output of one position. But generally, there is a one-to-one relationship between position and job. So you can think of position as being a job from the company's perspective, where they're thinking about output and what it's supposed to fulfill in the larger picture of the organization. A job is taken from an individualistic perspective as a set of tasks that should produce some kind of output for the company. But like I said, it's not always a one-to-one relationship. There could be a situation where you have a job that fulfills multiple positions. So you might have a job where you have to be marketing and sales, and you have to be the accountant. So you have one job, one set of tasks that fulfills 3 different positions in the company until the company can fill the marketing position, or until the company can fulfill the accounting position, and so forth. So position is what produces is a specific set of outputs that the company needs in a particular area. A job is a set of tasks that an individual does to produce some kind of output. And oftentimes position and jobs are one-to-one, but often not. You might have been in that situation before where maybe you were fulfilling 2 positions at the same time at one job. Make sense? Next, we also have career. Now, your career is your overall progression. Potentially, it can be progression, stagnation, or regression of your titles over time. So think of career as a timeline of different jobs and positions. Now, like I said, you can progress in your career. So when you progress, you're essentially going up a ladder. And you start off like low-level job, and then you move up to a higher one and to a higher one. But you can also stagnate, in which case you just kind of stay here, and that's it. And you just don't really move up at all. You just pick one position and you work it your entire life. Now, stagnation isn't necessarily bad. If you find a career where there just isn't a lot of room for advancement and you're okay with that, maybe you're a mechanic and you just like working on cars and that's all you ever want to do, or maybe you're a teacher and that's all you want to do is just teach your entire life, that's okay. It's a stagnant career, but that's okay. It's not necessarily a bad thing. But then there's also regression too, where maybe you reached a certain level and then you suddenly start to, like, you get let go from your job and you can't get to the next level, so you have to go down a little bit. So life is probably more like ups and downs, but we try to hope for a career that progresses, mainly because it comes with more pay, more opportunities for personal growth and development, but that's essentially the difference. So you have position, which from a company's perspective is a set of outputs that a company needs in a particular area. A job is a set of tasks that you fulfill that can provide such outputs, and sometimes a position and job are one-to-one, but sometimes not. Sometimes multiple jobs fulfill a position, or sometimes a job expands to fulfill 2 positions and so forth, and then you have careers. Now, the other thing we have to understand is the difference between function and industry. Now, what do we mean between function and industry? Imagine if somebody said, I am a professional football player. And you're like, cool, all right. So what position do you play? And the person says, football. And you're like, okay, yes, we get that, football. Okay, but what position? Like, are you the kicker? Are you the quarterback? Are you the wide receiver? Oh, I play football. I know, but what position do you play? And you're like, well, I play them all. Wait, you play in the NFL and you're the kicker and the quarterback and the receiver and the tight end? Oh yeah, I play them all. Okay, you wouldn't believe that person. You wouldn't believe that person. So when football teams draft, they usually draft for a position. They draft for a quarterback, they draft for a tight end, or they draft for a receiver. It's the same thing when companies hire, because every job has a specific skill set associated with it. Companies just don't hire people, they hire for a particular position. So arguing that you would make a good quarterback because you can kick field goals wouldn't make sense in the NFL, right? They don't care if a team is drafting for a quarterback, they don't care about your field goal percentage. They care about your passer rating. They care about your completions. They care about how far you can throw a ball. They don't care if you can block, right? They don't care as much about that. It's the same thing with companies. They put it out for positions. So, your task as a job seeker is to have sold yourself as a position expert and enabling the company to hire for that position. So when you talk about what you do, you have to be able to articulate 2 things: your function and your industry. Now, your function is what you do. A function is essentially what is the set of skills and duties that you fulfill for a particular company? Often a function is a job title. I'm an accountant, or I'm a salesperson, or I'm a welder. You learn your function through education and training. So function is, here's what I do. Industry is the context in which I do it in, the industrial context in which I do it. You can think of it as a specific type of business that your company falls under that would indicate your product and service knowledge and operational knowledge of such companies generally. So an industry might be education, or tech, or government, or agricultural. Each of those industries has special industry-specific knowledge and practices that even if you know your function, you would still need to know some things about the industry to understand how your function operates within that context. So you learn about your industries through trade publications, news, and professional associations. Now, why would I need to have both? Because technically, you can get a job by just function alone, by just having functional skills. But as you learn the job, you also want to learn the industry, because when you become a manager and you want to move up in the world, you're going to need to know generally how the business works, not just your specific skill set. Because when you become a manager, you have to be able to know a lot of things about people's jobs, not just your own. And that comes through industry knowledge. So it's not always essential to have deep industry knowledge to start out. For example, with janitorial work, it may not matter if you know the difference between educational practices and, say, healthcare practices. But, perhaps it can if certain training requirements come into play. So you want to be able to articulate both. Now, if you are a undergraduate, let's say, and you don't know what you want to do yet with your life, if you can't figure out a function just yet, start thinking about industries that interest you. Here are some example industries. There's different ways to classify them, and I don't expect you to memorize all 16 industries. But go ahead and pause the video for a second and look at these 16 different industries. Which one do you fall into? Or which ones seem interesting to you? So I'll give you a second to look. Like I said, there are 16 different industries out there, and some people might classify them differently and say 18, but you can see how each of these industries is going to have its own set of practices and its own set of specialized knowledge. Compare education, where, with teaching and training and such, you would become something like a principal or administrator. That's different than, say, being a business manager, and that's different than knowing manufacturing, where you're working in a warehouse and you have to know operations and assembly lines and all those things, compared to, say, transportation, distribution, and logistics, where you're studying less than truckload distribution and trucking and shipping and international logistics and such. So either way, you want to become a master of both your function and your industry. So you got to know what your industry is to be able to start that path. Now, the next thing we're going to look at, and this is important for resume writing especially, is what exactly is a job, even more in depth. So I have something called the job equation, and this is just a preview slide. We'll go into each one in depth. But a job is essentially skills plus identity plus pay. And we're going to go into depth with each of these, because when you write your resume, what you're essentially going to do is break down your job into these little pieces, component pieces. Well, mostly this one and this one. You probably won't worry about pay too much, but still, you have to know at least these other two. Okay. Let's start with skills. Skills are essentially core competencies that you have that are marketable towards an employer. So these are the things that you claim to be good at on the job market that would be useful to an employer. So if you're like, I'm good at eating spaghetti really fast. Well, I mean, that's a skill, I guess, but it's not probably a marketable skill to a company, right? So we're talking about skills that a company could hire you for and pay you to do such things. Now, there are two types of skills, and you probably have heard this distinction before, so I'm going to go into depth with this just because it is important. There are hard skills and there are soft skills. Now, what's the difference? A hard skill is a set of skills that require specialized training. These are skills that you can't just learn on your own very easily, and often they have required certifications, like you have to pass a board, or you have to, get a certification, or you have to be licensed to practice. So examples of a hard skill, accounting, right? You can't be an accountant, you can't claim to be good at, you can't at least be an accountant without the license, right? And you can't go to school. Doctors, surgeons, right? Those are hard skills. You have to go to medical school to claim that you can do surgery on people. You can't just be like, oh, I graduated from undergrad. Oh, I'm a surgeon now. You have to go through the training and such for that. Like, nobody can just claim that they have such skills. Law practice. You have to have legal training and you have to be certified by the bar in order to practice law. So that's a hard skill. But there are also soft skills. Soft skills are skills that you don't need formal training to claim. A soft skill could be leadership. Like, you don't have to, there's no degree in leadership that says you can't lead until you have this certification or whatever. Communication skills can be a soft skill, or adaptability, or adaptability. Customer service could be a soft skill. Now, the thing about hard skills and soft skills is by the rhetoric makes it sound like as if one's more important or less important than the other, and that's not necessarily true. Employers definitely value soft skills, often as much as they do hard skills. And even some employers would say they'd rather have somebody with good soft skills, and we'll train you in the hard skills. Because hard skills are trainable, soft skills are not. Like, that's what a lot of employers will say. So it's not like one is good and one is bad, or, if you have one, you're better off than if you don't have the other set. Now, the other thing about hard skills and soft skills is they can sort of become one another, and here's what I mean. Soft skills can harden into hard skills through certifications and trainings. So what can happen is a specific soft skill like leadership, if this becomes industry trend, more and more, it might be you can't claim leadership until you have a certificate. So one way we try to make soft skills harder is we have certifications and trainings and programs that try to say you actually are good at leadership because you went through this kind of academy. Or you're really good at public speaking because you do Toastmasters. And so Toastmasters sort of hardens your soft skills. And so, because anybody can claim they're good at public speaking, or anybody can claim that they're good at leadership. So one way you try to harden a soft skill is you do some kind of training or certification, and it kind of gives you an upper hand over other people who claim to have that same skill and don't have that training or education behind it. Also, hard skills can soften too. Hard skills can soften if the education and training to acquire the hard skill becomes more mainstream and accessible. A clear example of this would be programming. Not everyone who does computer programming has a degree in computer programming. You can self-teach in computer programming, and there are companies that will hire you if you can just pass the whiteboard interview and you can show that you can interview. It used to be when computers weren't ubiquitous and the internet wasn't around and all that. Yeah, you had to go and get a computer science degree and you worked on the big computers, and computer programming was a very, very hard skill. But now it's starting to soften because you have all these free coding academies and boot camps and all this stuff that's making it more accessible for people to claim to be good programmers and prove it with their work. So there is definitely a two-way relationship there between hard skills and soft skills. Now, if you don't have skills, so let's say you're an undergraduate or you're at a point in life where you don't really know what you want to do. One way to acquire skills is to just get education. Education and training is the solution if you don't have any skills. So I don't have any skills, I don't know what mine are. Okay, go to school. Okay, but then what do I do? Okay, well then figure out what skills do you like using. Okay, so we'll get to the next slide. But For now, if you don't have any skills, go to school, get some education, get some training, and you'll have an idea of what your skill sets will be through that. So here's an example of some skills. So let's say if you're trying to figure out what you want to do with your life, what I would say first is write down your skills. What are you good at? So let's say you came up with a list here. You have pencil drawing, creative writing, technical writing, so social media. Maybe you really like Microsoft Excel and you're really good at that. And you like statistics and you think you're pretty good and you're really good at math. Maybe you were a mathlete in high school and you like researching stuff. Okay, cool. You have a list of skills now. All of these are marketable. These are all things that you could conceivably get paid to do. So you're off to a good start. Now, that's only the first part of jobs though. The second part of the job equation is the identity part. Your identity is essentially how you label your skill set that you are marketing yourself for. Your identity is the embracing of that skill set and allowing it to be labeled. For example, if your skill set is mostly concerned with movie making, so let's say you made a list of skills and they all related to film and movies and acting and such, then you might label your skill set as filmmaker. From the company's perspective then, they assign a label to a position to produce a result. And you embrace that label as a way to demonstrate your particular skills that help produce that output that they want. Now, the problem that some people have then is they know they have a set of skills, but they don't know how to label their skill set in a way that would match a position in a company. So, here are some solutions for when you don't know how to label your skills. First, you can always do career interest profilers. There's such one like the ONET Career Interest Profiler that is free. You just go to onetonline.org and you all will have access to those links in the class. And it's a free profiler, and it'll just basically ask you about what you're good at and how much you would enjoy what you say you're good at. And then they give you a list of industries and functions that you could potentially do based on that test. It's kind of like which Harry Potter character are you, but it's actually more scientific and stuff. And it matches the manufacturing, or it matches the job market, not Harry Potter characters. Okay. Then you have job boards. Here's what I often tell people to do. Go on like Indeed.com or CareerBuilder. Just go onto one of the generic job board sites that are out there and just type in a few skills that you want your dream job to have. So just maybe put, if you really like marketing, put marketing and maybe statistics and just see what the job boards say. What job titles seem to come up in mass quantities when you type in those skills. That might give you a label for how you would then approach marketing yourself. Or you can also go to a career counselor. Now, if you're an ACC student, ACC does have career counseling. We do have career coaching and all those things and a career center and all that. So you could definitely talk to a career counselor and they could, I don't know all the methods of career counseling. I'm not a career counselor myself, but they can talk to you and listen to you. Going back to our example here then, let's say you go through your list of skills and you highlight the ones that are most interesting to you. And you kind of say, all right, these are the job, like if I were to get a job, here are the things that I would enjoy doing most. So you highlight all of them, and maybe you finally realize, hey, what I think I want to do is I want to be a content writer, because a content writer does creative writing, they do technical writing, they do work with social media because they write on web pages. They have to know some statistics because they're going to probably do some analytics on their writing to make sure that they're reaching their impact, and they have to research to write about whatever they're writing about. Okay, I want to be a content writer. Perfect. Great. You have a label now for all of the skills that you think you want to package into something you're going to market to employers. And then when you write your resume, you're going to write your resume as a content writer. So then what you're going to do is highlight all of these skills in your resume. See, the mistake that people make is they just think, I'll make a resume and I'll list all my skills on there and I'll just put generic and then people will know where to put me. And it's like, no, it's not how it works. the job market, employers do not hire a jack of all trades unless they say we are looking for a jack of all trades. Just like the NFL doesn't just draft football players, they draft for particular positions. So when you're writing your resume, then you're going to write a resume that's revolved around a particular position. In this case, the content writer. Now, the third aspect of a job, though, is pay. Pay is basically compensation that enables you to live and pay your bills. So we all know what pay is. But it doesn't have to just be money, by the way. Pay doesn't just have to be money. It can also be benefits packages, healthcare, free childcare, just free rent. Maybe if you work for somebody and they'll let you live with them, like a care assistant. That's how some people get free rent, is they become a personal care assistant for somebody who needs personal care constantly, and they let you live with them for free. Okay, so that's compensation. But compensation is the part of pay that... Compensation is pay. I know what I was going to say there. Okay. Now, there is a season where volunteering would be beneficial. So it's not the case that if you don't have pay, like you're in a bad spot. But ideally, you want to make sure that at some point you do get paid, because that's how you live. Part of life in general is paying your bills. And there might also be times when you're either doing volunteer work, or you might work for a startup where pay is not an option yet. Like you're just not receiving a paycheck. Often entrepreneurs will do this. They won't pay themselves when they start out, and they'll just pay their employees. That's a thing that can happen. So generally, you can do anything you want in life as long as you can pay your bills. So that's one of the critical things to pay. Now, the problem is, and this might be you as you watch this video, is I know my skills, I know my identity. The problem is I can't get a job. Okay, so you're in this problem. When you have your skills set, you know your identity, but you don't have pay, that's probably because you're unemployed and you're trying to get somebody to hire you. Okay, so what happens when I have my skills and identity and I want somebody to hire me? Well, you got to get a good resume going. The solution to people who have skills and identity but don't have pay because nobody's paying them because they don't have a job, you need to have a better resume. The resume is the most critical document that you ever write. It's the most expensive document that you're ever going to write. When I mean expensive, your resume just doesn't get you a job that pays $70K a year. Your resume is also potentially the document that can get you something higher than $70K if it's so good the employer's willing to pay premium to have you. So you got to have a good resume. I cannot emphasize that enough. When you're on the job market, you are first a resume. You are first a piece of paper when you apply online. This has to be good. And so luckily, in Professional Comm, we learn how to write good resumes. The other way you increase your pay is through output. So let's say you do have a title and you actually are working. Well, one thing you can do to increase your pay is to increase your output. Talk to your employer and say, how can I be more valuable to your company? And then see what they say. If they say, well, if you can produce more of this, or if you take on this responsibility, okay, produce that output and say, okay, with this output that I've been putting out, is there a way I can have an increase in compensation? See, I just gave you a quick run through on how you can increase your salary. Beautiful. Okay. And improving your job search skills. One reason people don't get jobs, and one reason people have skills and identity but not pay, is they don't know how to look for a job. What? I just go on Monster and I apply for as many jobs as possible. Okay, so that's the problem, is you're going on Monster and you're applying for every possible job. So don't worry, in the next lecture we'll talk about how to search for a job, because you're picking the lowest percentage skill, or the lowest percentage strategy for getting a job, if that's how you're doing it. So we'll talk about how to search for a job effectively and diversifying your approach so that you're going to have high percentage shots and low percentage shots. So your solution to pay is to just find a company who will hire you and will pay you the amount that will help you live and meet your goals. But to do that, to get a company to hire you, you have to have a good resume, you have to know how to interview, you have to know where to look for jobs in the first place, and you have to have good output. Now, there's one more thing that we have to think about when we think about what is a job, outside of just the job equation. One thing that's changed in our economy, I would say in the last 30 years at least, is there's not one type of employment. What do you mean? Okay, there's actually 6 different types of employment. First, you have the traditional type of employment with a traditional job. The traditional job is you work for one company, you log hours, you get paid a salary, and you get benefits. In this type of employment, the hope is that you will stay with this company as long as possible until you quit or they fire you, one or the other, or you retire, okay? This is what we generally think of when we think of employment. I call this traditional employment. One company, progress there 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, retire on the pension, never change jobs. Okay, yes, that's traditional employment. But there's actually 5 other types of employment as well. You also have temporary and seasonal employment. When you're a temporary or seasonal worker, you're fully employed by a company, but it's agreed ahead of time that it's only going to be temporary for a specified amount of time. There's a lot of situations where you might be a temporary or seasonal worker. If it's Christmas time and you need some extra cash, you might have done this. You might have worked at a retail store just for the winter break so you can make a little extra cash and then go back to school. That's temporary seasonal work, or in the summer. Or you might work for a temp agency. Maybe you don't want to work the traditional 40 hours a week, 9, 10, 12 months out of the year, but you don't mind picking up a job every once in a while, just temporarily. Well, you can work for a temp agency, and what happens is let's say a company wants to let their secretary go on maternity leave, let's say. Well, for the however many months that the administrative assistant's on maternity leave, they don't want to have to hire a whole new person and then have to fire that person when the person comes back. So what they might do is hire a temp worker, and they might go to a temp agency, and the temp agency will have a list of people who can do that job. And then you fill in that person's role while they're on maternity leave for however long. And then when that person comes back, they just say, okay, thank you. And you're done. That's it. That's temp. Substitute teachers are temp workers. Then there's independent contracting. When you work as an independent contractor, you're working for a company as a contractor where you get paid to fulfill a certain duty or provide a certain output for a period of time. Now, when you're an independent contractor, you get no company benefits. And you're exempt from a lot of the company policies and procedures because you're technically independent. So you're a company working for another company. And so you get a lot of autonomy in terms of how you fulfill the job and what you do because you technically don't work for them in the sense that they control your time and such. You work for yourself, but they're hiring you to provide a certain output for a while on your own terms. And then once you've provided the output, then you're done. Okay, we don't need you anymore, but here's your money for what you provide, for the service you provided. As an independent contractor, you can work for multiple companies at the same time, depending on the type of work that you're doing. So you might be, if you're an independent contractor, say graphic design. So the company doesn't want to hire a full-time graphic designer because they don't want to have to pay benefits and all those things. So they'll hire you as an independent contractor, and you'll just be their graphic designer, and you work for yourself, and you bill them when you produce something. But you might work for 2 or 3 companies at the same time because company A may not need you all the time, and company B might not need you all the time, but company C might. So you still hold on to company A and B, but you're still doing stuff with company C. And then there's freelancing / what I call solopreneurs. And this is where you work for yourself as a company and you sell directly to consumers. And you produce goods or services to a client. Now, this does sound a lot like independent contracting, but the way I make the distinction, independent contracting is usually business to business. So you're a business helping another business. Freelancing is business to consumer. So what we say in the business world, here, I'm going to try to type this out. So there's B2B and then there's B2C. Okay, so B2C is it goes straight to the consumer. The consumer is usually one person and it's coming out of your own personal expenses. So a freelancer would be somebody who works directly for a consumer. A babysitter is a freelancer, right? So if you're a babysitter and you babysit for your neighbors, you're a freelancer. Or if you're an interior designer and you're just one person and you do freelance work for people's houses, okay? So you're a freelancer and you just work by yourself and you just sell a service to a consumer. So it's a service that you provide to a consumer specifically, but it's B2C, not B2B. Then there's also family workers as well. If you grew up in a family business or on a family farm, you may have worked for your parents And, maybe you started working when you were 14. In fact, that's what I did. My parents owned a business for 7 years, and I worked at my parents' business when starting at 14. I helped with bookkeeping and filing and all that stuff with my dad. So family work is also part of employment. Now, the interesting thing about family work is, pay, because it's like your parents and all that stuff. But yes, that is a form of employment. And then lastly, there's the shadow economy. Now, the shadow economy is basically making money under the table, okay? So these are all ways that could be illegal. So shadow economy could be, I'm not encouraging any of this stuff, but like gambling, like illegal gambling, sex work, drugs, contraband, all that stuff is shadow economy type employment. But it also could just be things that are under the table. So shadow economy could also be migrant labor that's paid under the table. So in that case, to avoid paying taxes, they're going to pay you in cash. And so that's part of the shadow economy. So you're technically are employed, but you're just being paid under the table, or what you do, you can't be open about because reasons. Okay? So here's the good news with the 6 forms of employment is that you have options when you're deciding what is good for you at this time. I always encourage students, if you are a graphic designer, for example, there's no reason why you can't start freelance work, even as a student. And you can go on freelance websites and charge, at least a little bit, and start doing little projects for little people, and then start building your portfolio and making a little money on the side and working for yourself. I think that's far better if you're a graphic designer or if you're a filmmaker to just start doing some freelance work, start doing some weddings. And, you can charge a low price because you're not one of those professional companies, but then you can make some money on the side and you get to work for yourself. And then it's just beneficial altogether. But some of you are probably doing seasonal work if you're an undergraduate and so forth. So anyways, there's a lot of things you can do there. Now, what is a marketplace? We've just talked about what a job is. Now we have to understand what a marketplace is. Because when you apply for a job, it's in the context of a marketplace situation. To understand a marketplace, we have to understand market dynamics. What are you trying to be? That is the question that you have to figure out before you can move forward in the job market. If we play on the analogy of the job market being a market, in that there is a group of people or there is a plethora of people vying for a particular product, then there are 2 roles that you can play in this market. You either play the consumer role, which in that case, you are the person who consumes products, or you play in a producer role, where you're someone who produces the products that the consumers consume. Now, one thing about the market mentality that we're going to talk about is who is technically the producer and who is technically the consumer when it comes to labor economics. But another thing that comes into play with markets is trends. When we talk about markets, there usually isn't one person who controls the market, okay? And instead, markets, because they're mobs of people or mobs of entities, they more or less work on trends. There is no central governing body that governs a market in terms of what it's going to pick or what it's not going to pick. Now, there could be incentives in a market given by somebody that will help make the market form a norm of some kind. But markets generally work on trends. They don't work on laws of physics or anything like that. This is an important thing to know because when we talk about employers, we're not talking like as if the employers all get together into a room and pass rules about who they hire and who they don't. These are just trends that employers tend to follow because it just tends to work out for them in a particular way that they hire in this context or in another context. And in that case, because the market isn't controlled by a central governing authority, a lot of what markets operate on is perception. What do they perceive other people doing? And what do they perceive as valuable to themselves? And every entity in a market has to make that decision. The other issue that comes into markets is the idea of supply and demand. Because you have producers and you have consumers, there's going to be a level of production that the producers are going to produce, and there's going to be a level of consumption that the consumers are going to want to consume of whatever the producers produce, the product. Now, we understand if you took even middle school economics or middle school social studies that the law of supply and demand heavily influences economics. Supply being how many products are out there for consumption, and demand is how bad do the consumers want such thing. And it's the same thing with the labor market. There's going to be a certain number of jobs out there, and there's going to be a certain number of people who are going to want those jobs. If the highly desirable jobs are few in number, but there's high numbers of consumers who want those desirable jobs, those jobs are going to be more competitive. So in the market that you're entering, it's still really competitive as both a consumer and a producer. And this is going to have implications for how you market yourself in this context. But one thing you should know right away is that it's nobody's job to create jobs. A lot of people think that employers like to create jobs, like it's a fun thing. And we often measure our economic health by how many jobs were created. The problem is creating jobs is expensive. Creating jobs costs money. If an employer has to create a job, they're going to have to pay somebody, which means there's going to be labor costs. An employer's job is not to produce jobs. An employer's job is to keep the doors open and to meet their bottom lines and make sure they're in the black. Sometimes creating jobs helps them do that, but sometimes cutting jobs helps them do that. So we don't want to think that an employer is solely out there to just hire you. An employer exists as a company because they have to reach some kind of output. They have to produce some kind of product, and you are a means to helping them create that product. But they don't create jobs just because it's fun, or because it's cool, or because we just like to hire people. No. There's always some reason or end that they're seeking. So what is the winning mindset then? What's the mindset you should have when you're entering the job market and you're taking professional communication and you're writing your resume and you're doing your interviewing, you're doing your LinkedIn, and you're doing all this stuff? This transcends all of those things. Well, first, you have to leave the consumer mentality. Here's the consumer mentality. It's the me mentality. Basically, when somebody is in the consumer mentality, they're only thinking about the job market and they're only thinking about hiring as what's good for me and my career. So if you were to ask somebody with the me mentality why we should hire you, they'll answer with something like, it'll be good for my career because I think it would be really fun for me and I think I'm really good at it. Okay. It's very me oriented. You'll often hear this too. I'm on the job market because I need a job. So why should we hire you? I need a job. And I need a job that's good for me and will apply my skills and will help me grow in my career. Or they'll say, it would be good for my career. Exactly. Or they'll also say something like, I meet the qualifications. So when you read their cover letters, they'll say something like, dear employer, they'll start it off with something like, I meet all the qualifications for the position. I have 10 years education. I have 5 years experience in the marketing industry, and I meet the qualifications. I have a certification that you require, and I meet the qualifications. Okay. And then they'll say something like, I think I would be good. It would be good for my career, and I would have a lot of fun doing it. Okay. So very me-oriented. I'm taking value from the company, and here's all the stuff you're going to give me when you hire me, okay? This ultimately communicates a sort of neediness. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, I have the degrees in training. That's the other one. But yes, anyway, this all communicates a sort of neediness. Like, the company is there to fulfill my needs, and this is all about what it's good for me, and it's all about me, okay? It's like the whole Satan on South Park, me, that kind of stuff. But here are the problems then with the consumer mentality. If you go on the job market thinking, I'm getting a job for me, this is what happens. Number one, you can tell that persuasion is not about me, or it's not about you, okay? So if you tell an employer you're valuable because it's good for you and it's good for your career and you meet the qualifications, you're making it all about yourself. That's not how you persuade people. You don't persuade people by telling them talking about your needs. You persuade people by communicating your value. When you communicate your value, you're going to say not why I need the job. You're going to argue why you need me to fulfill your output. There's a completely different perspective there. It's not why I need the job, it's why you need me. Secondly, like I said earlier, companies are not charities. A company's job is not to create jobs. A company's purpose is not to hire people. For a company to survive, it has to meet its bottom line. It has to produce a certain amount, and it has to produce competitively. That's the other piece of a market. A marketplace is a competition. Everybody's competing with each other. So a company is not there to help you fulfill your needs. A company is there to produce an output, and you're a means to that end. So you need to speak to that and not just speak to yourself. And thirdly, this is where a lot of people, I think, kind of get confused, and this is one of the problems that people have when they have this mentality. When you're applying for jobs, it's not a high jump, it's ice skating. So let me explain that a little bit. A lot of people think if I apply for a job and I meet the qualifications, I should get the job because I meet the qualifications. So what they're thinking is this is like a high jump. And like if there's a bar and if I jump over the bar, I win. Okay? And then like if everybody else, so it's like track, right? So if I am able to jump over the bar and nobody else can jump over that bar, I win, haha, blah, blah. Okay, the problem is that that's not how hiring works. It's not based on do you meet a standard. That would be true if the company could hire an infinite number of people, or if you were the only person who applied. In that case, yes, maybe a high jump metaphor or analogy would work really well. But the fact of the matter is, you are not the only person applying for a job. Companies, depending on where they post and what the job is, will get hundreds, if not at least dozens of applicants. And a lot of them will be equivalent and very similar to you. So you have to think of it more as ice skating. If you were to say, I know how to ice skate, therefore I deserve an Olympic gold medal, you would be wrong, right? If you go to the Olympics, well, I already know how to ice skate, so see, I get the gold medal. No. If you just start like skating on on the little ice and you're just like, see, I'm skating in a circle, see, I'm qualified, and you're like, nope. To win the Olympic gold medal in ice skating, you can't just know how to ice skate, you have to ice skate the best. So when you're communicating your value, you're not just saying, I know how to market. You have to prove that you're the best marketer, that your marketing is awesome. Not that you just know how to do it, but that you're the best at it, and that you can provide some kind of value with your style of marketing or with your style of doing X or your style of doing Y. That's going to be better than however else anybody else will do it. So everybody who enters Olympic ice skating knows how to ice skate, no doubt about that. So the question isn't who knows how to ice skate, it's who ice skates the best. And that's what you have to communicate in your resume, interview, LinkedIn, networking, all of those things. The better analogy then would be to be thinking of yourself as a producer. What you have to do with the producer mentality is you have to think of yourself as more or less an entrepreneur of skills and the companies as the consumers. In this mentality then, the focus isn't on me. It isn't on myself. It isn't on what's best for my career or what's best for what makes me happy, okay? No, you're the entrepreneur and you're selling a service. And these companies that you're applying to, they have an opportunity to buy your product, and your product brings value to whatever it is that they're trying to do. And you can prove what that value is. You can show them this is the value that you're going to get when you hire me. And it's awesome. The producer mentality is you-oriented mentality. So instead of saying, dear company, you should hire me because I need a job, the producer mentality says, if you want to increase your profits and increase your sales, you should hire me because I have the best, I have been trained in such and such sales techniques, and I've been able to produce 10% increase in profits over the past 5 years at my current company. Boom. You're focusing on what are the company's concerns, and you're speaking to their bottom line. Every company wants to make money. Now I understand there's nonprofits and stuff in education, but okay. But if you go into corporate, most companies want to make money, okay? So if you can speak to how you're going to make them money, you're going to be persuasive. I will add value to your company. So that's something that's going to be stated throughout your cover letter. That's something that's going to be stated on your resume. And you're going to show how you're going to increase their value. I will grow your profits. If you're going in education, I'm going to help transform your students into greater learners. If you're going into government, I'm going to make things more efficient, or I'm going to serve the public as best as I can, or I'm going to make your clients as happy as possible. And then just whatever the company does, that's what you're going to speak to is their bottom line. And then, instead of saying, I meet the qualifications, therefore I deserve the job, you're not going to argue entitlement. See, people in the consumer mentality, they'll say, I meet the qualifications, therefore I deserve the job because I meet the qualifications. What you're going to argue as a producer is, my qualifications demonstrate that I have a proven ability to deliver what you need, and I'm not entitled to what you want. I'm not entitled to your job by any means. But if you don't hire me, you're missing out on a huge value proposition. Like, you're missing out on money. You're going to lose money by not hiring me. I mean, you don't have to. You're not required to. I'm not entitled to this position, but you're just missing out. Like, you're losing money by the second by not hiring me. That's the producer mentality. You're saying, I'm the one who has value, and you're going to miss out if you don't hire me. So communicate benefits, not features. In review, we looked at what is a job. We looked at skills, identity, plus pay. We looked at the different types of employment. We looked at industries and such. Then we looked at a market, and that markets are driven by trends and competition and producers and consumers and supply and demand. And the market you're entering is going to be a competitive market. There's going to be fewer jobs probably available, a lot of people graduating. But we also saw a winning mindset for this market. I mean, these are the winning mindset I'm teaching is exactly what you need to have to do well on the job market. And the most common reason when I worked with the long-term unemployed was they had this consumer mindset. When they switched their mindset to the winning producer mindset, their world got turned upside down in a good way. So that's the beginning of Introduction to the Job Market. We'll talk about how to actually search for jobs in the next video. And then we'll teach you how to take all of these ideas about markets and winning and turn it into valuable results. See you then.